Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Genre Blender podcast, a celebration of storytelling across books, games, TV, film, and more. My name is Ryan.
I'm Kris, and today's topic is stories for escapism, which is different to our last topic, which was cozy storytelling. Ryan's going to tell us why as we get into it. But it has been a couple of weeks. I feel like it's been this whole 2025 situation has been a year
Yeah,
for a lot of people in our circles. So
and we're not even in May yet.
no, we've just scratched the surface of Q2. So it felt like it was, I don't know, it's still time to try and keep mellow, relatively
Yeah,
easy to listen to topics for a little
yeah,
bit, because we've been talking a little bit, and I've basically just been whinging to Ryan, but mental health just been trash the last few months, I would say.
yeah. Legit. For both of us, and I think for a lot of people listening and watching as well, and it's just the way it is right now. But I think this topic came about just because we needed it. I actually messaged Kris off the podcast and just said, "Hey, can we switch the topic back to something simple, please? Because my brain's just not there
The
to
brain
do that."
space isn't there.
Yeah,
I've been dreaming dystopian worlds, and I'm like, no, we're living one. I don't need
yeah.
to, please, I don't need to dream it as well.
No,
I do.
that's why I haven't read The Stand yet. I just can't. I
Don't
just
do
can't
it,
pick
man.
it up now.
I do have to bring up that you do have a Nintendo Tokyo bag in the background of your, what's that situation? What's
Yeah,
in the
it's
bag?
funny. I realized that after setting up for the podcast for the day, and it looks like it's placed there on purpose. It's not. It's for a friend. There's stuff in there for a friend from Japan. That's it. But also, it's kind of we'll probably be talking about some Nintendo news anyway. So I guess it's it's on brand.
It's very on brand for the podcast. I feel so.
Absolutely.
Um,
So speaking of news, you wanted to sort of talk about some news for today, and I thought, and we've been talking about it. It might be good to talk about not actual political news, like we're avoiding that at all costs, but fun news. And we thought we'd make a little bit of a segment out of it. So yeah, what you got?
yeah, so adding in a new segment just because I constantly read and watch trailers, and it's mainly gaming news. I only have one thing of book news which happened prior to the last podcast that we recorded, but I've come about it since. And Foz Meadows, who's a transmasculine author, has been picked up by a relatively small publisher called, I think it's Erewhon, for a new duology. And it's always kind of cool to see our people, our brethren and NBs be picked up for things like that. So Foz Meadows has, I believe, 2 series out. So I think he's got. I've read one of them. It's a romantasy duology, and I quite like the first book. I was a bit iffy on the second book, but it's cool to see our people getting picked up, particularly in the political climate that we're in. So that's called The Weight and the Measure, and it's a duology, apparently for fans of Martha Wells and Catherine Addison. So it is fantasy, I believe, and Martha Wells has done both
Yeah.
sci-fi and fantasy. So that's pretty interesting. But the big news of the week, and the one that I want to talk about, is there was a leak for a potential PlayStation 6, plus the date of 2027. So I moved past Nintendo now because we've had that. It's been confirmed it's coming in July. One of us has pre-ordered it, Ryan,
Me, it's me.
already.
Hello.
I was going to talk to you about that as well. I'm not getting any more consoles, bruh.
Do I need one? No,
No.
not at all. Absolutely not. Do you know what the size of my Switch One backlog? It's sizable, shall we say, and I do not need another console in my
Is
life.
it
But
backwards
hey,
capable? I'm pretty sure.
it
You'd
is.
be right.
So that's yeah,
I mean, you
that's
can play
why.
on the new one. We all
Exactly.
talked about, because I only got an OLED for Christmas last year. I
Yeah,
don't really play it all that often, and when I do, I replay games. I'm a replayer.
yeah.
I'm not a rewatcher or a rereader, but I will replay old favorite games.
Of course.
Um, just because I don't know, it's a conundrum. I can't tell you. I don't know what the logic is. But interesting that you've gone and pre-ordered it. I looked at the PlayStation 6, I guess, prototype, and it's done by AI, so we don't know how
Yeah,
much of that is correct. It's come off the back of Xbox talking about their release in 2027, and normally you'll find that they tend to come together. And Xbox got in first. Normally, it's Sony gets in first, and then Xbox follows. So I wonder if they panicked and just no, we're doing it as well. Um,
yeah. Legit. It's
but
such an interesting time for gaming handhelds. Like, are we back? Do we finally have handhelds again in the
I
world? Like, they
I'm
just went
not
away for so
mad.
long.
I'm not mad.
Yeah,
But then we're seeing things like the Steam Deck and like the ROG Ally X has come out, and I've got my eyes on that, but it's $1,700. I'm like, I don't know if I can justify that. It's basically
it's
another.
PC, isn't
It's a
it?
PC.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so I think coming off the back of that and the success of that, now I know Microsoft have been in talks with Steam and having the monopoly of computers. I don't know in technical terms, so you'll like I sound like a dumbass. But from what I understand, the Xbox will partner with Steam and have that capability as well. So they won't only have Game Pass, they will have the Steam library. And I was like, maybe I'll just wait for that because that is probably what I want personally. I just play pixel art, but
yeah. Yeah,
I
you're the
need
same.
the Steam Deck.
Yeah,
So potentially my next console will be that, or I'll just
yeah.
bite the bullet and get a Steam Deck. But yeah, the PlayStation for PS Sony people, pretty exciting. They both look good. The differences between the two, from what I understand, is with the Sony, it looks like it's going to be two separate consoles. There will be a physical,
Yeah.
normal console, and then the PlayStation Portable 2, I think. Whereas Xbox, I
Yes.
think it's the one entity.
Yeah, it's rumors for now, right? So we don't know for sure. Like, it's still not, it hasn't been confirmed or anything as far as I know. But yeah, from what we can gather, it's going to be a little bit like a PC, really, where if you've got
Yeah.
a PC, like a gaming PC and a Steam Deck, so you can play you PC games on the go. But I mean, from what I have heard, and again, I haven't read too much around it, and I take it with a grain of salt because again, it's not confirmed properly. But um, I think it's going to be like PS5 quality games that you can play on it. So who knows whether you'll be able to play like the actual games coming out for whatever
PlayStation
PlayStation
6,
6,
yeah.
yeah, portably. Who knows? It's an interesting time for PC handhelds. Like, I'm excited. Like, there's so much choice right now. And a mate and I were sort of going through. We had a bit of a conversation about the whole physical versus digital debate. Hi, Mike, if you're listening. He actually listens to the podcast. He's
G'day,
probably listening
Mike.
to this one.
Welcome.
But yeah, we've been talking about it a lot, and it's on my mind as well because with the whole game key card situation for the Switch that's coming out, the Switch 2. Who knows what that looks like for physical games going forward? And I'm thinking maybe this might be the console generation for me to actually switch to digital properly full time.
Well, I think we could have a whole podcast episode on that. The
Yeah,
move to digital media and the ownership rights of media. And we just saw all that stuff that happened with Kindle and Amazon, and people moving away from that and moving into COVID. But that's another topic. I don't want to get too bogged down in that. We're here
yeah,
to talk about escapism. I also saw there was some stills released for Old Guard 2. Old Guard was a great movie. Charlize Theron as
yeah,
like a middle-aged action badass. Like, I'm here for anything this woman puts out
totally.
as that character, and that's releasing on July the 2nd. So I'm very, very interested in that coming
I
out.
didn't know about that one. That's I'm excited now. That's
Only came
actually
out
really cool.
the news came out this week with the release date, so they've kept it pretty under wraps to say that this is now done. We're in post. It's coming
Oh,
out
wow.
because it's a Netflix movie. I'm pretty sure Old Guard was, but I really
Oh,
liked the first one.
that was great.
And then I guess the elephant in the room for old school gamers, like millennials, we're going to be such a generation of like old people gamers. Like, they're going to have
Nothing
like
wrong with
Nintendo
that.
64s and like retirement homes for us.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered
Yeah.
was released, so a lot of people in my circles have just like lost their lives and like calling in sick to work so they can like go and relive
Yeah.
their youth. So that was a bit of fun to see. I never got into it; it's not my thing, but seeing people get
That
really excited about it was
that was the
really
first
cool.
Elder Scrolls game I actually finished because I got into it with Morrowind way back
Oh
in the
yeah,
day.
yeah,
It's old
yeah.
now. That
That's
was more than 20 years ago.
we are aged. We're showing our age.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah, it's that came out of nowhere. It was kind of interesting, but yeah, I'm not gonna play it again. I've had my time with that
I
game.
feel
I
like
spent
if
so
you
much with
put
that game.
300-400 hours into it, like, you're done.
Yeah,
You've done your time.
yeah,
And the last one I'll mention, sorry everyone, I get excited about this stuff, is I've just backed a Kickstarter for, but the game's not coming out until 2028, but I would rather give them money to develop it because it looks sick, is for a game called Seed of Nostalgia, and it is inspired by Chrono Trigger and I think it's Golden Age, but a lot
Wait,
of
what?
those, yeah, I'll put the link in the description box.
Wait, what? What is this? Oh my god, what
It
is this?
looks, the trailer looks amazing. It is old school JRPG turn-based with 100-hour like gameplay. So you've got the mechanics of modern day gaming in terms of storyline and progression and things like that, but with a very nostalgic feel. It looks great, and I backed it this morning. I was like, I've looked at backing this since it, got released on Kickstarter. Fuck it, I'm just gonna put, and it's like $40 to get the digital key for it on Steam. And the good thing about Kickstarters is that when you back it for Steam, you tend to get early access or beta access, so you get in first and give feedback and stuff, which is cool. I'm done with news. Sorry, everyone. That was like 10 minutes of me crapping on about things I'd learnt about this week.
That has been your escapism for the.
It really has. It
for a little
really
while.
has.
Yeah.
Because world news sucks. So
Gaming news, far more fun. Definitely recommended. Yeah, that's very cool. I'm excited. I'm excited as a gamer right now. I'm super excited, and the quality of games right now, like indie games, like it's funny that when we talk about indie anything, and you're often talking about indie books that you're so very invested into right now, but for me it's indie games, and it's funny how I don't really gravitate towards indie books so much, but the gaming world of indie developers and publishers is just, it's exploded. There's just so much, and they're so good. They're excellent quality. I've got a few to talk about in a little bit as well, but yeah, it's a great time to be a gamer for gaming stories as well as just like cool little indie games.
But I think, like, I guess the good thing about indie, and again, another topic we could just really delve into, is the developers and the publishers or the writers, they get to tell their own story. It's not really dictated by other parties.
Yeah.
Which is why we're getting this, very story rich, very, like, I guess, personal things to the people who are making them, which makes, and you can feel that when you play it or you read it, you can feel that it's something
Yeah,
that
you
they've
feel
done
the
for
love,
them.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
It's like when
all
you
these,
cook with
like,
love, like you can taste it when people cook with love.
yeah, absolutely.
Um,
And some of these bigger AAA games, and in my experience, I've been playing a little bit of Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I've sort of put that on the shelf again for a little bit. But like, I don't know, sometimes they feel a little bit soulless, whereas with a lot of these indie games that are made with a lot of love, from people that really just want to make these games, you really do tell, you can tell, you do feel that love, that soul in those games. So
there's too many
absolutely.
Dark Souls games just to like play on that these days. And you know what doesn't have a soul? Those fucking games. I hate them so much.
Not for me either, but
Yeah.
a lot of people love them. I get it. Cool, awesome. Well, yeah, exciting times. So good that you're keeping up with the gaming news. I can nerd out with you over that. It's been fun.
Do I play games? No. Do I read about them? 100%. Like,
It's a whole hobby in
it's a
itself.
whole hobby, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of hobbies, though, what about in terms of your read, watch, play for the last couple of weeks?
I feel like I've just spoken forever, so I'm going to hand over to you to do the first read, watch, play update.
Fair. All right, that's cool. Actually, quite a bit for me. Not reading. I've really not been reading too much. I've been having some eye issues, so reading has been a bit difficult. But instead of that, I have been gaming a little bit. I did finish watching The Pit, season 1 of The Pit, TV series, medical drama. Although don't take that, like, I don't watch medical dramas. I talked about it last episode. Fantastic. It took a bit of a tone shift in the middle, just went in a completely different direction, and I love it when shows do that. You don't expect it, but the writing and performances of that show are just top notch. It's one of the best shows I've seen in a long time, so highly recommend that one. Can't wait for season 2 of that. I'm assuming there's a season 2. I don't think there's been anything said, but I think it's critical acclaim at the moment, so hopefully. And I finished playing 5.5 games.
Damn, that's pretty good. It's time to start working on that backlog.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what's been happening. Mostly on the Steam Deck. It's just been great to pick that up and play. I rolled credits on Monster Hunter Wilds finally, so it's not the end of the game of that one. Obviously, there's so much to do after that. The game just begins when you roll credits. But I decided not to wait for Steph for that one. I just played it. It's great.
That's so funny. We should get our partners onto one of these episodes to talk about the differences in personalities, because I feel like you're very like Rachel-esque and I'm very Steph-esque when it comes to like gaming.
Very much.
I've just seen season 2 of The Pits coming out January 2026.
Nice. Oh, there you go. Breaking news on this podcast.
The important things. We don't
Yep.
need to know about anything else except
Yep.
for read, watch, play.
That's it. Um, so yeah, anyway, played that. That's been fun. And then I've been playing a couple of indie games that have been on my list for a while. I don't know if you've heard of these. There's a game called Emily is Away.
I've heard of that one.
Indie game by a game developer called his name's Kyle Seeley. I think it was out in 2015. The first game.
Yeah, it's been out for a while.
Yeah, and then there's two other ones after that as well. But the whole game, the premise of it is it takes place inside basically it looks like AOL Instant Messenger, little chat messaging client, and that's the whole game. And the story is told through the conversation between you, the player character, and this girl, Emily. And yeah, there's a few Easter eggs and things. You can change your user icon, but the whole thing is just dialogue. But it's more about like what you don't say, the stuff that isn't said, as opposed to what is said, and the relationship between these characters. And it does some really brilliant things. And I don't want to spoil it because, like, you know, it's a very short game. It took me like 40 minutes to play this game. I recommend it. I think it's fantastic. It's very experimental, but it works really well. And I guess a lot of people thought the same if he's made two others. I did play the second one. The second is mostly a remake of the first one. You can just do more stuff. So it's kind of the same story. There's a couple of other characters that are introduced. But yeah, just the whole thing is through AOL Instant Messenger, and it's just amazing. It brought back a lot of memories, a lot of
Nostalgia hit, yeah.
Yeah, but in a good way, I think, at least for me. So that's been fun. And also another indie visual novel style game called Once Again. I only heard about this one recently. I actually don't know when this one came out. I don't think it's super recent, but more recent than Emily is Away, I think. It's by RB Wolf Games, who are a Malaysian game developer. It's also pretty short. It's just an hour, but it's more story than game. A lot of visual novels, they do a lot of puzzles and things as well. This one doesn't really. It has interactive, like comic panels. It's told through like a comic book. And you can interact with certain parts of it, but it's mostly a story. So I recommend this one for anyone who's like thinking or interested in the idea of a visual novel, but is mostly a reader. If you kind of want to dip your toes in, this is kind of a good game for that. And it's only about an hour long, and it has some fantastical elements, but I guess it's more like magical realism in a way. But a very small amount. It's still pretty grounded, and it's about a little bit about grief, but not in a sad way. It's kind of hopeful, but also about memory and about family and relationships. And yeah, it was very very thoughtful, very nice. Kind of shed a tear or two at the end of it. It was just nice, you know, kind of a nice story to read and experience. So those are my indie games, and then I finally finished Life is Strange Double Exposure, which is
We talked about that one a couple times, I think.
Yeah, before I went to Japan, I started it and I intended to finish it, and life just gets in the way. But it's episodic, so there's like 5 different episodes, as all the Life is Strange games have. Um, this I wish I wasn't saying that I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't for the most part. It was like the first one that was a bit of a swing and a miss for me. The first 3 episodes, amazing, really good, like as good as every other Life is Strange game. The last 2 were just a bit of a hot mess, sad to say. Which is a shame because it's Max Caulfield. It's the main character from the very first game. She sort of returns and she's got like this resident teaching position at this university, and you get to know these characters and stuff. And the first 3 episodes are great. The characters are really good. Like, you know, I really fell in love with the characters, but just the gameplay elements and what happens in the story in the last couple of episodes, it just kind of falls down. If you're a Life is Strange fan, you're probably I think it's still worth playing, but it is just a bit of a shame that it kind of didn't really hit the mark. And I'm just wondering maybe if it was made to make a quick buck more than the other ones were. Anyway, I had some enjoyment from it, but it kind of fell down at the end. The point 5 game that I haven't quite finished, I'll talk about next week, but there'll be another one that hopefully by next episode I would have finished.
Love a good point 5 game. I feel like I play games that just never end, so...
Yeah, same.
Like, yeah. I think it's part of the cozy appeal, though. Like, they have an end, but then you just continue on.
Just keep on playing.
You just keep on playing if you want to. Cool. That's a fair bit of gaming that's happened. And you're back at work this week or last week? from the
It's
trip?
been a couple weeks now. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Work gets in the way. It really does.
I know,
Of like
right?
just wanting to chill out and not do very much. I finally read Pride and Prejudice. I finished it yesterday
Wow.
morning. I loved it. I loved it so
Wow.
much. And it's super interesting to read it at the current time that we're in. And I think sometimes, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but for escapism, but it's like a lot of the issues that these, Jane Austen is poking fun at because it's satire when you read it. She's making fun of society. It's like women are still dealing with this shit. Like
Yeah.
so many years
Not much has
later,
changed. Yeah.
and almost to the point that she's making in this book. And it's kind of crazy to think that, a whole, lifetime essentially has passed since the release of this book. And she's poking fun at this idea of women needing a husband or husbands needing a wife. She's poking fun at society basing all of their emphasis on relationships and drama and gossip between families. And it's almost like we're full circle back to that now, particularly in America. And we won't get political, but it's like, is this the way that we're driving society to be again? And it's just really, really interesting to have read that during the current political climate that we're seeing in the Western world right now, and some of the shifts that they've come back from this. We were poking fun at it, and now we're like, no, this is the Christian ideal. But I found it really funny, really enjoyable. The writing, it was fantastic. I listen to a lot of classics, so if I pick up a classic, I tend to be doing it on audio. Just lyrical prose tends to work better for me listening to it. So I had a great time with that. I am very much looking forward to the next Austen novel that I pick up. I think a lot of
Wow.
the time we get bogged down in our heads about classics being super dense and difficult to understand. It really wasn't. Like the language is quite poetic and flowery, but very easy to follow along with. So I had a great time
Yeah,
with it.
wow.
I feel like
I would not have picked that, I gotta say.
I had a
Like I
loved it.
yeah, I wouldn't have picked that you enjoyed it as much as you did. Like I would have said that you probably would have got stuff out of it. The social commentary aspect of it and the the satirical nature of it and all of that. But yeah, wow, that's cool. I'm glad you
I
liked it.
love Mr. and Mrs. Bennet as a couple because she is fucking ridiculous, and he's just like eye rolling at her the whole time through, and I just think they had such a fun dynamic. Um,
Have you watched a Pride and Prejudice film before?
I've never watched a Pride and Prejudice, but I
It,
think I'm gonna get Rachel to watch them with me
yes,
now.
that will
So,
be a fun exercise.
but I was like giving Rachel updates, and she's like, "I've read the book and I've watched the movies. Like, I
I
understand
know what happens.
what I know
Yeah,
what's happening." And I was like, "Okay, but like, just let me talk to you about it." I give her like book reports of
nice.
whatever I was reading. And I've also picked up a book called The Tome of Huron, which has an interesting backstory. This is by Damien Francis, an Australian author, and I think it's indie now. He's self-publishing, but it was published by a vanity press a couple of years ago, and this vanity press just did a bunch of authors dirty and took a lot of money, and a lot of them are now going the indie route. So this one releases on April 30th, and I will not read it in time because it's 1,047 pages, but I am currently reading it about 20% through, and it's quite good. And a book that I'm reading for escapism at the moment. So we'll get into the why and I guess the differences in a little bit. In terms of reading, I've finished. I'm actually up to date with Yellow Jackets, Wheel of Time, and Mid-Century Modern. So I have spoken about all of those before. I very rarely like finish anything and to be up to date is quite a feat. And then Rachel and I watched the 1997 Disney Hercules last
Oh, wow.
week because I just needed something to turn my brain off, and I've been thinking about it. And I got a lot more references as an adult watching this as opposed to watching it as a 6-year-old when it came out.
Nice.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. And playing, I went back to Chef RPG. It had a big update come through with a bunch of quests and things. So I was like, at least I know it. Very easy to fall back into. And I've just purchased a game called The Wandering Sword because leading into our topic of escapism, I feel like I need something to chew on. And this is an RPG I've been looking at for a while. Story-based, East Asian inspired. Looks very pretty. Again, pixel art. Got a longer game time, and I want a story to chew on. So I was like, I need something to play with my controller because that's like I don't know, it's so dumb. But I'm like, if I'm holding a controller, like I'm invested in it. If I'm just like pinging around on keyboards, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I can do whatever. I can do other stuff at the same time.
Good to
Um,
know. I'll park that one for
yeah. So if
later.
I have a controller in my hands, I'm in
Kris is
business.
serious.
So that's what I'm planning on doing after this. I haven't started it yet, but I bought it last night to play today.
Nice. Very cool. Very exciting. Yeah. Yeah, actually, and this will come up in a moment, I'm sure. But yeah, just those games that you just want to you just want to jump in with both feet and just get surrounded by this story. And I think when you're feeling that, like that's a sign. And then what you do with that, we'll talk about in a moment. But I think that's definitely good to good to sort of know in yourself. That's a sign that I need to do something about this. Cool, awesome. So, shall we jump into escapism? I suppose I'm in good company here because you're basically the king of fictional escapism.
It's so funny because like we do the same shit, but we do it differently. And I feel like what I use for escapism may be polar opposite to what you
Yeah,
use for escapism, just because that's on brand for us.
of course.
So yeah, let's jump in. Actually, I'm going to pause.
Yeah.
All right,
All right. So
let's get into it. Sorry, I ran away for a second. Um,
we are
so
back.
anyone who's watching, I have derobed because it was hot in here.
Perth weather.
Perth weather.
So I thought our topic for this episode is stories for escapism, and I just wanted to sort of preface the topic and introduce it by explaining the difference that, at least for me, and you can have you've got your own take, I'm sure, on escapism or escapist fiction and stories in general across all different mediums, compared to like cozy storytelling. And for me, I guess the biggest difference is cozy stories are mostly for comfort, and a lot of that for me, as we talked about last episode, is repetition, things that I know what to expect. Um, I know what I'm going to get out of that thing, and I'm doing it for the comfort aspect of it. Whereas escapist stories, for me, if I'm reading or watching something or playing something for pure escapism, I want to dive headfirst into that world, and usually it's going to be a different world to our current reality. No, not always, but mostly. And usually it's going to be complex, and it's going to have a lot of moving parts. It's going to be all encompassing, and I may not know what to expect. It might be new and it might be novel. That's my sort of interpretation. How about yourself?
Yeah, quite similar. When I think about cozy, and yeah, because I am a cozy gamer normally, I can sink hours into X, Y, or Z cozy game. Just I don't know, copy and paste whatever tavern-esque farming simulator I've chosen for the moment. They all follow a very similar formula. In that you're right, you sort of know what to expect. You know you're going to have some sort of time day. There's going to be little quests that you can do here and there, but for the most part, you're left alone, and it's a very easy learning curve. With escapism, I tend to want personally a little bit more meat, something to lose myself
Yeah,
in and get sucked into, and that might not hold my attention for the same amount of time, but when I'm doing it, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking the thing that I'm doing, whether that be a book. I don't tend to use movies, but whether that be a book or a game, that is holding my attention and it's getting me out of my head for that moment. Um, and they tend to be more story based than anything else that I do, which is quite interesting, or thematic heavy because I'm thinking about something and I need to think about something else. So I'll lean towards a different thematic elsewhere. But yeah, I think we've both been feeling it. The next point on your notes, is what do we use escapism for?
yeah, absolutely. And this whole topic came up because of like mental health reasons. It's just like if we're both feeling it at the moment and trying to put I don't know if anyone's. I mean, if you make your own stuff in terms of content online or anything else in life, you kind of have to switch your brain into that mode, and sometimes that's just hard. Even just work, your regular day job. Sometimes that can be really hard, and especially right now in the way the world is. And I think us and everyone else is probably feeling it, and so it definitely serves its purpose for taking yourself out of your current reality and putting yourself into a different reality for a while. I think the point that you made though about it might not always last a long time. Whereas a lot of cozy games for you, especially, there'll be games that you can play on and on and on, and don't necessarily have a finish to them. But a lot of escapist stories are very finite in that sense. And I feel the same. Like, I want to be in this world for a while, not forever, but for a while, and just, enjoy myself and see what it has to offer for a bit. But then often I'll be finished with that and want to move on to something else. But they definitely serve their purpose for like a limited amount of time in which you just don't want to be in this current reality for right
it's
now.
it's interesting because, like, I guess escapism has a clear disconnect. So turn off whatever you're using for escapism, and you go on to the next thing. Cozy for me, because I tend to like play games that do the things I like in real life. So I would finish, for example, playing Chef RPG, and I might play it for 20 minutes because that's how long a day normally lasts. I've like just run a restaurant and cooked, and I stop that game and I go and cook like for dinner, which I also do find quite therapeutic. Is prepping and serving food, and I know that my mental health is trash when that goes out the window because one of the first things that goes is nutrition.
Yeah.
And I just need to put food in my body. I don't really care where it comes from. So I know that shift for me is usually when I'll like lean into something that's going to take me out of my headspace and go, all right, cool, I'm playing this, and this is what I'm doing for the next 2 hours, which, again, not something I usually do. So if I need to sit down and do something for 2 hours at a time, that tends to be like, all right, there's a thing there going on that I need
and
to
being conscious of
chill.
that.
Yeah.
For sure. I find that I don't not so much. I don't really read for escapism in the same way that perhaps you do, or as much as you do. For me, it's mostly games and movies. But I feel like I don't do that as much as I used to when I was a kid, and I think it's the time factor. Because I think for me, if I'm making this conscious choice of diving into this, let's say it's a completely different world. Let's say it's a science fiction story, where I'm just like in it completely, and I'm so excited to be, reading this story or being in this story, whatever form it takes. For me, I don't like being pulled out of that. I find task switching pretty hard. I think we've talked about it before on the podcast, but often that means I won't even choose to jump in because I know that being pulled out of that will be painful in a way. So for me, it's a lot of conscious choices of diving headfirst into this world because I know I can spend the time that I need to there. Or I'll just refrain from doing that completely. But it's definitely with games and films for me as opposed to books, although there are exceptions. The Expanse series, that's pure escapism for me. It's cool. But yeah, I think for mental health reasons, it's important.
I think it's really interesting. As you go older, and anyone who has like a full-time job, and I can only imagine what it's like having children. I think we've spoken about it before here, but you really do have to be very conscious of where your time is going and what your needs are in that moment. And I mean, we've spoken about balance and things like that here as well, but I'm finding myself very time poor at the moment. I'm coming up to a month, which is just a bit hectic. So do you choose to escape? And if you're escaping, like you were saying, it's hard to task switch, for yourself more so than me. Is there a point? Is there a point to escapism when we do that? And is there a point, I guess, counter argument where you go, no, I have to. Like, I have to do this, or I'm not going to survive the next day, or at least not with the mental clarity that I would like to.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also in the sort of the same vein as that, if I am choosing to lose myself in a fictional world for a while because I need to, I also know, and I think this is part of the reason I don't do it as much, is that I will be ignoring my family or my, my partner, my cats, the house, whatever, cleaning, cooking, whatever, that I should be doing. And that's hard. As an adult, that's hard. That's just adulting in general though, right? But I think when it comes to escaping, when you need that, I think it's important to know, to distinguish when that is critical. And you just need to for a while, because I think that's also very important.
I think there's an element of letting go as well that we need to be aware of, not necessarily for this topic or escapism, but when you do have a lot on, like today I've got beta reads and stuff happening, and I was like, I need to let beta reading go today because my my capacity only has, I've only got so many spoons, as
Yeah.
we refer it to. That spoon not there today, but what I can do is get 10 pages of my editing done. I can do this podcast, and then I'm just going to have an afternoon where I don't put any sort of pressure, and that's what I'm going to use for escapism. I'm going to go play Wandering Sword and hopefully have a good time with it this afternoon. Actually, I need to edit a video anyway. The content creator life.
That's it.
That's it. But you got here like our favorite stories to escape to. Now that we've got a bit of a definition between the two of us, so what do you normally gravitate towards to escape?
Yeah, for sure. So I think so. When we were talking about cozy stories last episode, I mentioned there's two parts to it for me. One is like the ones that are sort of traditional definitions of cozy, so your Stardew Valleys and your whatever for you, and for me those are games that I will frequent, that I will play over the long run, but also sometimes things like an RPG, which may not be one I've played before, but I kind of know what to expect from it. So those are also sort of the same for both escapist stories as well as cozy stories. But I think for me, when it comes to like pure escapism, it's going to be mostly like let's say those big action movies, or like Alien, Terminator. Like, those are my favorite ones that are both cozy on some level, not the traditional definition of cozy.
Tell that
Alien
to the crew of the whatever the alien ship was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that is mostly escapism for me, but I can jump into those. But I think at the moment it's things like I'm playing Monster Hunter, right? Monster Hunter Wilds. That is pure escapism for me. I can just turn my brain off when I'm playing that game because there's nothing you are doing except for fighting that monster. Nothing else exists for you in that moment, right? So I find gaming really good for that because it's not only the story that you're escaping into and the world, but it's also the gameplay itself, which helps the escapism element. So that's why it's mostly games for me. Things like, I think I've mentioned them before, but there's TV shows that do this really well for me. Farscape is one of those, because that is just the weirdest show. It's just it does so many things and there's so much going on that you kind of lose yourself in a show like that. I remember Battlestar Galactica was very much escapist for me. I don't really go into those too much now unless I'm going to commit to watching the whole run. I don't really just watch an episode here and there, but those kinds of stories, really good for escapism. But yeah, mostly for me, it's RPGs. I just want to lose myself in a JRPG. There's a game that's just been announced actually called, just come out actually, called Claire Obscure.
That looks
33.
sick. It's fantasy though.
I know.
I was going to ask you off camera if you were going and you're going to pick this one up.
Yeah, I think I will. And the reason is I'm kind of leaning towards that, even though it is that, aesthetic that maybe I'm not the biggest fan of, but purely for escapism. That's a world that's very different from our current one. Maybe, and there is, I think it looks a little bit melancholy as well, so I'm a bit cautious about it because I know.
I was like, we're just feeling melancholy.
Yeah, sometimes it's not the best idea, but sometimes there's something that's just making me want to pick up that game. So I might, jump that to the front of my my gaming backlog and play that one for a while. Not sure, but
I don't know if you can call that a backlog. It released this week.
My gaming.
That's a front log.
Yeah, front log. Nice. Yeah, so we'll see. But exactly those kinds of reasons. It's very fantasy, right? And while that's not something I gravitate towards, when I feel the need to escape into a world that's completely something else, those kinds of stories kind of call me a little bit more.
Would you? Where would you class replaying or rewatching or rereading? Is that more cozy or is that more escapism, or could it be a combination of both? Much like I guess JRPGs is a good example. Very formulaic. They tend to follow a very similar formula, and there might be tweaks to the stories. Same with like any trope, like pick a trope for books. Those stories tend to follow a very similar formula, but you get different characters and different worlds, and that tends to be where the escapism lies. So I'm not a rereader, but I am a replayer. So if I'm really feeling it and I just want to like escape, Saints Row. It's ridiculous,
yeah.
Right? Like, there is no rhyme or reason, particularly to the later games, and they know it. The developers were like, fuck it. The game very much feels like the fuck it bucket. Like you just go and you do
Nice.
nonsense. And like you escape because
Yeah.
you're not even you're not thinking about any real world anything. You're just there to, I don't know, use bouncy ball guns on aliens. Like there's no reason
Of
for these
course,
games to
naturally.
exist. Um, but I'll go and replay the third and the fourth one in particular because they're the ones that got a little bit more like they just stopped caring. Whereas the first two were quite story heavy. But where would you fall on redoing anything?
Yeah, I'm not really much of a rereader either. In fact, I really don't reread that. At least not anything other than classic books, perhaps. But for games, mostly I'll replay a game for cozy reasons
Okay.
because I already know what to expect. Um, JRPGs are kind of this weird in between because of the formulaic nature of many of them. So it's a bit of both for those. But I find that for me, escapism is really mostly story reasons. Like I want to, like for example, the upcoming Exodus game that I'm so hyped
Mhm.
for, and that massive tome of a book behind me
Have
here
you
that I
read the
still haven't
book?
read. No, so
To
but
be
I'm
fair, it's going to
excited
take you
to.
12 to 18 months to read that book.
Probably. We'll see. As long as I read it before the game comes out, that's it. There's another one actually. There's going to be two in a series, so I've actually got to get on that pretty soon. But like that would be escapist reasons. Like that would be pure escapism because it's a world that's just like it sucks you in. There's so much to it. But I find that it's more switching on my brain rather than switching off. Switching off the brain, cozy reasons. Switching on the brain, escapist reasons for me, at least.
It's just interesting because Rachel's replaying Death Stranding at the moment, and like she gets an itch every couple of years. Like she's been playing it since I had top surgery, which was a while ago, 5 or 6 years
Yeah, wow.
ago now. And the first time she played it was when I was in recovery because she was at home for 2 weeks and she played it.
Yeah.
And I know we're getting the second one. I believe it's June or July this year, and she's been wanting to replay it. But I know that for her, that normally means that she needs a break
Mhm.
because that game is so familiar and it's so repetitive. Outside of the storyline, you're building America again, like you're building the roads and helping people move around, and you're just collecting materials and you're just building the roads throughout America. And yeah, some combat and things like that. But essentially, if you're just doing it for that repetitive nature, I know what I'm getting into. The world is immersive. And I was like, I wonder, what she's playing it for. Is she playing it because and that's normally an indicator that her brain needs to stop.
Yeah.
And she's just building roads, helping
Yeah.
people move their motorbikes around in like this dystopian world. So it's interesting when you put in the differences.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would escape to. I would say that I tend to, because I don't gravitate towards cozy reads all that often, and I'll use the reading examples as is my way. When I read to escape, I want something very easy to grasp, but will still suck me in. And I'm going to use a series called The Weevil Chronicles by Aaron N. Hall here. And these are YA novels, and they're fantastic. Super simple. Very simple premise. It is tropes that you know and love. They're noble, bright. They're, I would say, clean is probably not the right word to use because there's nothing wrong with certain aspects of other stories. But if you were going to give a book to a kid, like there's no gratuitous violence or sex in it. The premise is good v evil. Young lad has a very clear bad to go and you know beat. But the writing is very easy to follow, but it's also very well done. And I feel like that is a balance not a lot of authors are able to achieve, where you're still able to go, this is a story I can get sucked into, but there is no difficulty for me to get immersed in it. And it could also draw that line between cozy and escapism. The one I'm reading at the moment, The Time of Haran, is multi POV. We've got a huge world. Now, I'm a world building guy. It may not work for character driven readers, if I can get immersed in your world, because I'm also a visual reader, so I know we want to do the aphantasia test, but I would be very surprised if I wasn't someone who was able to very clearly visualize when we do that test. I'm able to see and feel the world, and if I can do that, I'm escaping into that world. So I'll tend to pick bigger, slower stories that I can sink my teeth into and spend some time with. And even if I need to put, a story down, I'm still thinking about that world, so it's still allowing me to escape into it regardless of what I'm doing after the fact. So I'm hoping that The Wandering Sword, when I pick it up tonight, does that, where I'm I put it down after a couple of hours and I go, I'm still thinking about it. I'm still living in that world. I'm able to continue with my life whilst also being immersed. But yeah, I also tend to go a little bit more story heavy in those moments of needing to escape, as opposed to I just need to stop, so I'm going to go and do the same thing for
Yeah.
2 hours.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, you brought up a couple really good points there. One being the immersion aspect. That's the word I was trying to think of before. Being immersed in a world. I think that's also a reason I want to read or watch or play something for escapism. It's being immersed and using those sense details, right? Having the ability to put yourself in the world. And I think that's why games work for me for that, because I'm the character often
Yeah.
doing the actions, whereas I struggle a little bit with watching or reading something because I'm watching or reading someone else do those actions, if that makes sense. So yeah, really, really good points.
You've got an interesting point that I want to really sort of delve into, looking at time and the essence of time. I spent too much time talking about news. Writing for escapism, because I feel like for creative people, not necessarily for everyone, writing is such a powerful tool to sometimes just get out your thoughts. And people who aren't necessarily authors, writers and authors, there can be a difference there. You can be a writer without being an author. It's such a powerful, and oftentimes, if you go to any sort of therapy, they will encourage people to use this format of getting your thoughts out. So writing for escapism may be different than just, writing to get those thoughts out, but it is such a powerful tool. And we see some very, very thematic books or essays or poems because people need to get it out of their head and onto page, and then that will provide escapism for another person. So I tend to lean into thematic heavy books, or Pride and Prejudice was very good for me in the last couple of weeks, and that's quite theme heavy. I read another one called Dance With Me, which is about surviving emotional trauma. Very heavy, very thematic, but I was like, I need to stop thinking about my own bullshit and start thinking about somebody else's, and that was...
It's a way to escape.
It's a way to escape, but then again, it is also a way to work through those things that you were thinking about. I'm going to use my own book here, not as a plug, but I was reworking a scene before we jumped onto the podcast, and my book is my transition story in a fictionalized way. And the way that the world is going, we're talking about training, talking about battle scenes, talking about the world not really caring about trans people or hybrids because they're looking elsewhere. And it was a bit of a flip for what we're seeing at the moment, where a lot of what I would argue are bigger issues are being held hostage or being quietened because the world is focusing on trans women right now. And it was a bit of a flip on that. And I actually had Rachel come and read it, because I rewrote this scene, and it was just a lot of my thoughts about it coming out onto the page reversed. And I actually had Rachel come and read it, and I was like, is this too political for a new adult book? Because I don't necessarily want people to know that this is what I'm talking about, but I do want trans people to go, oh, I see what you've done there.
Right.
So it was quite interesting, because that may be escapism for somebody else, but for me it was very relevant at the time to go, I just need to get that thought out of here and somewhere else. So yeah, interesting.
I think the point I wanted to make with that, actually, you kind of just hit on it, which is, I think a lot of the time we want to immerse ourselves in another world for, to get out of this one for a while, right? But I think a lot of the time we're still thinking about these things. The stuff that's going on in the world, they're still going to be in the back of your mind. You can't separate yourself from that. So I think a lot of the times when we're playing around in another world, and when we're writing, I think that's a brilliant way to, like, writing and play for a lot of writers, much the same, right? You're playing around in a world with these characters, and it is a form of play in a lot of ways. It's not always. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth. That's a whole other thing. But it can be play in that sense. And I think that is another form of escapism. And sometimes when and I've noticed this in myself, if I get that feeling like I need to write, it's usually a sign of needing to escape for a while. But I often find that even though I set out to write about, a different world that's, different to our world, or with characters or things going on that are different to the reality, I'll often still be working through the stuff that's in my head in another way, in a way that's sort of separated from the current reality. And I think that's what fiction does really well, and especially that's, I've talked about it before, but that's why I love science fiction a lot of the time, because we can go and explore these social and political issues in a way that's detached from the reality that we are in, and still yet very relevant. You can still trace things back. So I think when you have fiction that does that, so your story that you've written, when you can do that on one level, you can read it in a certain way, but on another level, it's like layered in that way, kind of like Sesame Street, right? You can watch it as an adult and you get all these references, but as a kid watching it, you don't think about that, right?
It's like Hercules. I was like, I'm picking up on a lot of the references in there now.
All the references,
Did it
right?
when I was a kid.
Yeah. So I think that's, very much, it can be escapism, and it can also be very much, social
Therapy.
commentary. And therapy, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. Why else do we write? It's therapy.
And it's interesting because there's, stuff going on in the world at the moment. We've sort of been very candid about our mental health not being the best right now, but we're also adults, so we have to continue on with our lives whilst this is going on. And I plotted out what I assume will be a short novel a little while ago, just having some big thoughts, and I was like, big thoughts, need to put it down, thinking about a lot of things. A friend of mine's father recently passed away, and I was thinking about death, and it's quite a heavy topic, and I was like, well, how do I work through the things that I'm feeling and get that out onto the page? And that was a form of escapism, just not necessarily even writing the thing, but plotting out what this would look like for me and how I would deal with that thematically in a fictional way. And that was an escape. And I was plotting it out for a couple of hours, and that took me out of my own headspace while still thinking about the things that I was thinking about, obviously very relevant to me at that time. And it's something I would encourage people to do as well, even if you're not a writer or an author, you don't want to be. Sometimes it can really help process what you were saying before, just really help process those things that you're trying to put words to. Because sometimes people ask you, people who have partners or, parents, what's wrong? I don't fucking know. I can't tell you what's wrong. I don't have the words for that. Sometimes writing it out is very, very helpful because it will give you the words, because you might be thinking about them subconsciously, even if it's jargon to you at the end of it. The act of doing it can be very helpful.
Absolutely. I recommend this to everyone I know who is dealing with stuff, and we have a conversation about it. I will always recommend writing, even if, as you said, if you're not a writer, doesn't matter. It's the same with there's a reason art therapy is a thing. It's another way to process stuff that's going on. I think it's an important one. Cool.
Got deep.
Did, but also important, and I think useful. Hopefully, it's useful to other people. Let us know.
And I put a last point here before we sort of end here as a potential tangent, because it's not necessarily related to reading, writing, or playing, and that's tips and tricks that we use personally to help with our mental health, and what do we do to pull ourselves out of spirals. I guess we all spiral. No one is perfect. There are going to be times in your life that are harder than others, and like I said, as adults, we just have to sort of get on with it and keep moving through. So do you have any tips or advice that you can give to people?
I think the ones you just brought up before about writing that's a good tip. That itself is a good tip. I think it all comes back to being conscious of it, right? And I'm far from being the best example of that, and I'm sure you'll say the same, but when you can recognize that in yourself, that you do need to escape for a while, if you're in a relationship with someone, or your living conditions are with somebody else, and you have certain obligations that you need to get on with as an adult, I think being able to communicate, hey, I need this time, this is important, and as I said, I'm far from perfect at that. I'm still struggling with that right now. That's the thing that's going on in my life, and being able to communicate that to my partner, to say, hey, I need this time right now because I'm not functioning. That's a good thing to recognize and be able to communicate that. Other than that, I think finding the things that work for you, I've got my go-tos that I'll use in times of needing to escape, but sometimes it means experimenting, finding something else, trying something else, figuring out what slots into your life in a way that you can spend that time, or maybe just a little bit of time doing a certain activity because that's helpful, and finding those stories that resonate with you for those purposes in times of need.
I think the experimentation is a good one. Particularly, we've got some young people who listen to this podcast as well. So, you're not going to have everything figured out. I don't have everything figured out. I'm entering my mid-30s this year. I got no one does. Like people that I know in their 60s are still trying to figure it out. It's life. And I think that's both beautiful and can be very frustrating at the same time because we're just all trying to figure it out and then one day we'll perish. and at the end of the day, none of us can have anything figured out, but that's fine. That's what life is. I know for me, letting things go is very hard for me because I'm so regimented and so structured. And over the last couple of months, I think I touched upon this in the last episode as well, I've really realized that I have to, otherwise I will not be able to function. And I had a week earlier this year where I called the doctor and I was like, I think I need a mental health day. And they're like, nah, dude, you need a mental health week. You need to be doing nothing for the next 5 days. And that was a bit of an eye-opener for me because I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I just couldn't function. And having a medical professional being like, your body's literally telling you to fucking stop right now. And it was, okay, how do I make that not happen again? And I thought at that point I was pretty good with my mental health. Obviously, things just built up to a point where I couldn't anymore. Something that I tend to do is go, what is the least important to me today? I do have a bunch of obligations. What can I push and put into tomorrow and make that be a priority for tomorrow? And if something has to give tomorrow, it's not that thing that I've taken off today. So for me today, it's beta reading. Tomorrow, that's now a priority and something else will have to go. If I can't do it tomorrow. Another thing is, I don't know, people who've watched my blogs may have noticed, clothing. I don't tend to change my clothes. If I am not feeling well, that is a thing I don't want to think about. I now own the same shirt thrice. Because if one of them needs a wash, I'll put the same fucking piece of clothing on and I'll wear that piece of clothing all week. I just have clean versions of it.
100%. So eliminating decision fatigue, such a great life hack in general.
So people will tend to notice in vlogs I'll be wearing the same black shirt for the 10 days in that vlog. It's clean, I promise. And sometimes Rachel will be like, hey, so I'm just going to take this off you for 2 hours and I'm just going to wash it. Like, no offense needed. However, here's the other version of the shirt that you have and I'm going to wash this one and you can have it back when it's clean and dried. And like food, nutrition, comfort meals are a thing. So for us, it seems like so silly to say. If I'm not feeling cooking, I will go and make a bowl of oats with peanut butter and corn syrup, bananas in it. It's like, hell yeah. I'll eat it all week.
That's my breakfast.
I know how to make it. It's comforting, especially now it's cold, and it takes 10 minutes to do. There are things. Just find your things.
Find your thing. Exactly. Find your things that work for you.
Find 100%. Your things that work for you and talk to people. Ryan asked me if I was okay the other day and I was like, bruh. It's like, but it freaking out.
That's what you needed. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, hopefully, I don't know, whoever's listening, watching, hopefully you find this useful or comforting or just knowing there's other people around that you can talk to that are going through the same stuff, that hear you and see you, that you're going through your shit as well. So yeah, absolutely. I think we're all in the same boat and it's a time and sometimes you just got to do what you got to do.
It often feels like you are alone and nobody and like that other people are
logically
going through
you're not, but
the same, but you're like, okay, but this is mine. This is my trauma and I will be holding that. Thank you so much. It's not weak to speak, I guess, is at the end of the day.
I've not heard that one before. I like that.
There's a whole brand. It's a clothing brand that has a lot of it on there. I think it's a charity. It's an Australian charity as well that, particularly for masculine people who are taught societally, that's not a word. Well, it will make it one.
It is.
That you shouldn't talk about things. And I think that's not a gendered thing. I think a lot of people are taught that maybe you shouldn't talk about this stuff because it affects other people, and it does. Being conscious of that is another side tangent. Yeah, it's not weak to speak. Talk up. Find things that work for you, and if they're not working, experiment. Maybe try a story for escapism. Had to get it in there. Had to
Bringing it back around.
roll it back.
Nice. Cool. Well, look, I think that about wraps it up for today's episode. But thank you so much for watching or listening. Notes and links to all the stuff we discussed are in the show notes for the episode. You can find us at Genre Blender Podcast on YouTube and in your podcast player of choice. You can follow us at Genre Blender Podcast on Blue Sky and Instagram. I think those are the main places we're at. Still haven't figured out the social media situation. At some point we will. You can find us there and genreblenderpodcast.com. Kris is over at A Fictional Escapist everywhere, including YouTube and Instagram. I'm at ryanfloyd.com on Blue Sky, which is pretty much the only place I'm at the moment.
Cool. And to all our world hoppers out there, we wish you safe travels, very safe travels. Look after yourselves in the current climate. We will catch you in the next episode. Well, I won't. I'm not here in the next episode. But Ryan will be here with a guest star. I think you're talking about movies.
Maybe. Special guest. We'll see. Not saying any more than that.
All right. Lips are sealed. I'm going to be watching that one as just a viewer. That'll be fun. I don't think I've ever watched one just as a viewer.
I know, it's good.
But until then, we'll catch you in the next one.